I'm Todd Yeary, Senior Vice President of the Rainbow Push Coalition, with an update on the Breonna Taylor case in Louisville, Kentucky. Last week, Kentucky Attorney General Daniel Cameron announced that there would be no charges filed in the death of Breonna Taylor, a young Black woman who was killed in her apartment on March 13th of this year after Louisville Metro Police executed what was supposed to be a no-knock search warrant at her residence. Attorney General Cameron assumed responsibility for the investigation into Breonna Taylor's death after a conflict of interest forced recusal by the county prosecutor's office. In his initial press conference, Daniel Cameron assured all of us a full, thorough, and comprehensive investigation. However, after his prosecutor's presentation to the grand jury, no indictments were returned for the killing of Breonna Taylor. Only one officer, Detective Brett Hankerson, was charged with 3 counts of wanton endangerment in the first degree for shots that were fired into an adjacent neighbor's apartment. After approximately 40 rounds being fired that night, no charges tied to what happened inside apartment number 4, Breonna Taylor's home, were announced, setting off successive nights of protests. After over 110 days of constant and persistent protest, presence, and pressure in Jefferson Square Park, which is called Injustice Square Park, by those who continue to demand justice for Breonna, justice is still wanting. These protests have galvanized activists, members of faith communities, and interested members of the public to continue to demand transparency concerning the grand jury proceedings. After 5 nights of a state of emergency and a countywide 9 p.m. curfew, the curfew was lifted and an easing of the vehicular restrictions began. However, the pressure on Daniel Cameron did not ease, and it must not ease. At Detective Hankerson's arraignment, where he pleaded not guilty to the charges, the court requested that the grand jury transcript be presented to the court by Wednesday of this past week. It is unclear as to whether the court would then make the transcript publicly available at the time of this update. The Attorney General's announcement came just days after Mayor Greg Fisher announced a settlement in the wrongful death suit against the city. The settlement with Breonna Taylor's mother, Tamika Palmer, for $12 million includes a commitment to the implementation of significant police reforms. However, Ms. Palmer and other members of the family, the community, and the nation continue to demand indictments against the officers who executed the warrant that led to the killing of Breonna Taylor on March 13th, and a review of the grand jury process that fell well short of justice. There's been much concern and suspicion concerning how the grand jury process was managed and what evidence was actually presented by Cameron's prosecutors. So who is Daniel Cameron, the young African-American Republican Attorney General? He is a protege of Senator Mitch McConnell, the majority leader of the United States Senate. He won in a statewide race that saw at the same time the election of the current Democratic governor, Andy Beshear, who was the former Attorney General for the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Even though Detective Hankerson has been terminated for wanton and reckless behavior on that night, the Attorney General's failure to return indictments consistent with even the most minimal interpretation of the evidence of the violence at Breonna Taylor's apartment, it confirms what we have already known. Elections have consequences. Now, while Daniel Cameron is not on the ballot this time in Kentucky, justice, fairness, equity, and opportunity are. Whether you're in Kentucky or one of the other 49 states in the District of Columbia, the denial of justice in the Breonna Taylor case and in cities across the country warrants that we all must step up and ensure that our voices are heard. As we continue to raise our voices and demand justice for Breonna Taylor, We continue to monitor all aspects of this case and many others and demand fairness, fullness, and transparency, even as the federal investigation continues by the FBI and the determination about police officers who may have violated policy continues. Now, we must also make sure that we are ready to raise our voices at the ballot box. The need for law enforcement reform, along with addressing the myriad issues that are plaguing communities across the nation, cannot be underestimated. We demand justice for Breonna Taylor, for Jacob Blake, for Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, Rayshard Brooks, and so many others that we remember on today. But we also must demand justice for health care, housing, education, jobs, community development, criminal justice and law enforcement reform, voting rights, and fair representation. How do we make these demands? In two ways: being ready and being counted. The Rainbow Push Coalition is working to ensure that everyone is counted during this census period, as the courts continue to ensure that this administration does not cut short the census counting period. It is incumbent upon all of us to be counted. Why? Because representation and resources are based on being counted. Secondly, everybody needs to register to vote, get educated about the voting process, and cast a ballot during this election cycle. Whether you vote by mail or in person, early voting or on election day, there's too much at stake to sit this election out. Here's what you can do. Go to becountedrpc.com. becountedrpc.com. There, you can verify your voter registration. You can register to vote, get information about the mail-in voting in your state, and get information about all of our voter initiatives in partnership with the Transformative Justice Coalition. And you can make sure that you are counted in the census. Together, we can make a difference. Together, we can demand justice for Breonna and George and Rayshard and Jacob and their families and communities. We will continue to monitor these important justice issues, and we will continue to fight for what is right. Remember, becountedrpc.com. Go there right now, register to vote, be counted in the census, and always remember to keep hope alive.